This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast, Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. And thank you for listening. This is episode 136, and it's actually a replay of episode 73. And it's a conversation with Dan Cockerell on starting your own business. Making the leap from being a corporate leader and expert into becoming a solopreneur can be daunting, but the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. And I can be that guide and thinking partner to help you do that. If you're having thoughts about starting an encore career, please contact me and take the self-assessment quiz on my website. That quiz will help you get some quick clarity around what might be possible for you in the future. And after you listen to the podcast, I encourage you to visit the website and download the PDF as a guide to the ideas that we explored in this episode. Again, I'm delighted to reintroduce you to this episode with Dan Cockerell. Dan is the former vice president of the Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World, Florida. Dan began his work as a parking attendant at Disney's Epcot Center, but he's moved up through the ranks and he finally joined the management team at Disneyland Paris. And in his last 9 years with the company, he was successively vice president of Epcot, vice president of Disney's Hollywood Studios, and eventually vice president of the Magic Kingdom, where he led 12,000 cast members and entertained over 20 million guests annually. So after a fulfilling and exciting 26 years with Walt Disney, Dan and his wife, Valerie, made the decision to set out on a new venture and start their own consulting and speaking business. And so some of this is going to be about, how Dan made the transition. And I think also it's going to be interesting to hear him explore, he took his expertise in the hospitality business, his expertise in building culture, and now he's applying that to other people. So I think it's a great example of how you can transfer the skills, knowledge, expertise you have maybe into some related or even unrelated businesses. So again, we're going to talk with Dan about how his journey started, what's different between corporate life and independent work, what the mindset that an entrepreneur really needs to have is, and then how did he go about doing customer discovery to even begin his business. Welcome, Dan. I really appreciate you being on the podcast today, and we'll jump right into it with our interview. But first, I'd like you to start off with sharing a little bit about your journey and the work that you're up to.
Yeah, well, Lynn, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for everyone for listening. I love sharing this. I'd seen a quote somewhere. I still can't remember who said it, but they said, something along the lines, you spend the first 25 years of your life learning, the next 25 doing, and maybe the last 25 teaching. So I just turned 51. So maybe I'm in the teaching mode now, or at least sharing experiences. Well, I grew up, my dad was in the hospitality industry and grew up moving all over the place and ended up going to Boston University and got a political science degree because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And during college, I waited tables. I worked at a bank one summer. I worked on the Walt Disney World College program one summer. At its peak, Disney had about 12,000 college students at any given time working there. And it's a great program. College students get to get experience. They get to get Disney on their resume. Disney gets to get some highly motivated college kids to go down and work for them. And it helps with their reputation. So I did that for a summer. And then when I graduated from BU, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went back to Walt Disney World and I said, okay, I was here 2 years ago. I really loved working here and I'd like to work here again. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, look, I tell you what, I'm pretty open. I have a political science degree. So what am I qualified to do? And they said, well, you can park cars at Epcot. That's what we think you should be doing. So, started out as a frontline employee there, a cast member, as we call them, and did that for about 6 months and just the timing was great because I had the opportunity to get a work visa and join the Euro Disney Internship program. So they were opening now Disneyland Paris. I was there in 91. They were opening at 92. And so through BU, I got a visa to work in France for 18 months. And so after 6 months working in Florida, I went over to France as a management trainee. And of course, they put me in the parking because that's what my skill was now. And we opened the park there April 12th, 1992. and ended up spending 5 years over there. Married a French lady we met in Florida, and we went over and got married over there. And we're coming up on 28 years now. And she keeps asking me, did you marry me for the green card? I said, look, we have 3 kids now. We've been married 28 years. Of course not. But we stayed there for 5 years, and I got frontline experience. And just about every year I went to a new job. And then we went back to Florida in 1997, and I continued to work there until 2018. 19 different jobs in total. Disney's big on moving people and getting various experiences. It makes you better at what you do, and it makes you understand your customer or your guest experience if you have lots of backgrounds and experiences. And then in 2017, my wife said, well, what's next? And I said, well, I'm the vice president of Magic Kingdom. We're just going to, ride this thing out, and I'm going to retire here like everyone else does. And she said, that doesn't sound very fun. And actually one day she came in the door and I came home from work, and she said, are you still having fun? And she could see on my face that maybe it wasn't as magical as it had always been. And after 26 years with the company, you start to think about, what else is possible. So I think between me kind of thinking about doing something new and her wanting to go on an adventure, our kids had grown up and we're out of the house. We talked about it for a year. That wasn't an instant decision. Leaving a corporate position after 26 years is probably one of the scariest things I've ever done, because you just don't know if you can know anything. You don't even know if you can make it in the outside world or have any value. And finally, 2018, gave my notice and left in May. And it's been 2.5 years now. Valerie and I have been running our own consulting company, and we've learned a ton. When I left, she said, I feel like we're 2 college kids now, except we got some money in our pocket and we're a heck of a lot wiser than we were a long time ago. And we've made our way the past 2.5 years. And, we've dealt with COVID like everyone else has. We've had to overcome. We've had to be creative. We've had to have a really positive mindset, because that wasn't in the cards. Being an entrepreneur is fun until no one's calling you to hire you. Then it's not as fun anymore. And we just moved to Colorado 3 days ago. And so we're now living out here, rented a place for a year until we figure out what we want to do when we grow up. So that's what we've been doing.
Well, you've certainly changed environment between Florida and Colorado.
Yeah, and we were looking forward to this. This has been on our list for decades. I worked in Rocky Mountain National Park when I was 16, and I told myself I was going to live here. And it just took, 35 years to get here. So
patience pays off.
That's right.
When you think about the early days, what were some of the things that you first noticed the difference between corporate work and being an independent? I'll just suggest that in the corporate world, when I was there, a lot of things were defined for me or done for me. And now all of a sudden, it's all up to me. Is that your experience?
No, that's a great point. In fact, when the quarantine, in March and April started to hit, Valerie said, I should be more worried, but I'm not. I don't know why. And I said, well, I think I know why. It's because it's totally on us now. We're not waiting for anyone to tell us what's going to happen. We know if we do nothing, nothing's going to happen. And so there's something about having to be totally in charge of yourself and be self-reliant and figuring things out that is kind of freeing. It doesn't make it any easier. It's still stressful. You still have to work a lot, but you know that you're not waiting for some decision to be made about whether you're going to keep your job or not. It's like if you don't go do something tomorrow, then I call it a non-paid day off every time we don't do any work. But I agree with you. I think that self-reliance, you are now defining what you're going to do, which is scary because it's a big white paper. Every day you can do whatever you want. And so you need to figure out what your strategy. The biggest thing for me was creating structure. I had so much structure at Disney. And when I left is, okay, what's our structure now? How do we think about our brand? How do we think about what we do? We can go do lots of things. And I've talked to entrepreneurs who said, you're going to do a bunch of stuff. And some things you're going to pay a whole bunch of money for it and realize that was a mistake. There's other things you're going to do that is going to go nowhere. And there's going to be little projects that you do on the side that are going to turn into big things. So you never know what that next thing's going to be. I think the other piece to this is you're given the plan when you're working in a big corporation. And the biggest surprise for me leaving Disney and doing this was when I was at Disney for the past 26 years, I'd say I was in the execution mode. Every day was get it done, figure out a way to get it done faster, more efficiently, and just execute. And it's interesting. You don't think as much. And I didn't really realize that. I thought I was thinking all the time, and I was, but it was a different type of thinking. When I left Disney, all of a sudden now I need to figure out how to put materials together and what is my message. And it's much deeper thinking when you're an entrepreneur, figure out what your product is and you're executing. So it's double. But I found myself, my brain was a little atrophied, I think I'd say. And so that I had to get the creative juices going again because, once again, when you're running a place like Magic Kingdom, there's a lot going on. You get to be involved in development projects, but your plan is, okay, I got 20 million people coming in this park this year. I got 12,000 employees. How do I keep them all safe? How do I make sure we're being nice to people? How do I make sure that we are executing on the plan? And now I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, what business do we want to be in? What do we want to do? And it's a big shift in, I think, how you use your brain.
I think too as you get on your own, all of a sudden you could wear all kinds of hats and learn all kinds of new skills. How did you decide what are the things that I'm going to do and what are the things I'm going to have someone else do for me?
Yeah, well, we're still learning how to do that. When I first left, it's all about we are going to do everything because we are streamlined. Talk about understanding what your costs and revenues are. I mean, you look at everything and you start to decide, is it worth hiring someone to do LinkedIn or can I do it myself? And I've seen actually examples, and I've heard people speak of entrepreneurs who sort of get caught up in having all these services done for them and they don't pay attention to the finances. And all of a sudden one day, half of their revenue is going to people booking reservations for them, travel reservations, or doing things that they could easily be doing themselves. So I like to pride myself on being pretty streamlined and self-reliant and doing a lot of things I couldn't do before. And I've discovered lots of technology. Calendly.com, it's a great tool where people can schedule time with you and it just shows what your availability is. Because I used to have an assistant. One of the things I tell people is when you lose resources, you become very resourceful. And so that's what we've done. We just hired someone to do some administrative work for us 10 hours a week. And that'll probably ramp up as she does more and learns how to do more for us. But you got to be careful and you really have to be in the getting stuff done yourself mode, I think, when you first start. And for a lot of executives leaving companies, they've never had to do a lot of that stuff. And so your ego takes a hit and you got to really realize, okay, I'm now doing my own thing. This is not corporate life anymore. So that's been a big change along the way of figuring that out. And to your point, there's another thing I guess I want to work in here. When I first left, the idea is, why does anyone want to hire you? Like, what do you have that anyone is interested in knowing about? And so, we have a common friend, Jody Mayberry, who's my co-host on my podcast. And he explained it to me really well because he's done a lot of this marketing. And he said, well, Dan, I can do lots of things. I can do marketing. I can do technology. There's lots of things I can do, but you can't go to a client and say, I can do lots of things because they're like, well, I don't know what that means. He said, you have to have a hook. What is it you're going to be known for? You're going to be the blank guy or the blank woman. And so for him, it's podcasting. Everyone knows him and they know he's great podcasting. And then once he gets hired, then people realize, wow, he can do marketing. He can do a whole bunch of other stuff, social media. And for me, I looked at it and we talked a lot and I said, I want to be known. I want to own the word culture. Culture is what I want to do. That's where I'm going to hook everything onto. And then once Valerie and I get hired for projects, we bring a whole bunch of other stuff. We bring training, we bring interviewing, onboarding, standards. I mean, working at Disney, we know a lot of stuff, but the entry to the door is we want to work with companies who think culture is important because that's where we really like to focus our energy because we know that when you have a great culture, it creates long-term success. And a lot of companies want short-term success. And we want to be careful because if we work for companies that don't believe in culture, we are going to fail them and they're not going to be happy with us paying us because we're not going to make them better if they don't want to think about the long-term results.
So Dan, with your focus on culture, I was curious, as you were getting started on that theme, did you have to do some work to create that message so people would buy it, understand it, so that they would understand what does that mean to them, I guess?
Absolutely. So when I left Disney, once again, I think people think this is really interesting or crazy. But when I left, I said, I don't know what I know. I don't know what value I can bring. And you talk to people going, well, look, you had 19 different jobs at Disney. You were vice president of 3 of the theme parks. You worked internationally. And I said, yeah, but I don't know how to apply that outside of Disney. And so one night I sat down, I just said, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to write down everything I know how to do. And so I said, okay, what do you know how to do, Dan? I said, I know how to communicate. What's that mean? Okay, here's what that means. I know about how to do strategic planning. What does that mean? Here's what that means. I know how to build relationships. What is that? So at the end, I had probably 30 topics of things I knew how to do. And I sent it off to a friend of mine, Keenan Yoho. He's a executive professor at the Cromer Graduate School where I got my MBA. And I said, hey, Keenan, I have this. I don't know what I have here. Can you look at it? I didn't even tell him what I wanted him to do with it. I just wanted him to look at it. The next day, he sent it back to me. And he said, Dan, you got 3 themes here. Leading self, leading team, and leading organization. I put them in the right columns for you. And that 24-hour period is now the basis for my book. It's the basis for how we talk about our business. It's how we do our workshops. It's how I look at my keynote speeches is that leading self, leading team, leading organization. So if you sit down, it's a simple and very hard process. You got to sit down and say, okay, what experiences have I had? Because a lot of the experiences you've had, you don't realize how valuable they are externally. And Jody sees that a lot. Things that I just think are second nature because I grew up at Disney doing those. And like you at John Deere, there's things you think about from the engineering perspective or manufacturing manufacturing perspective that you're like, well, I'm not going to talk about that. Everyone knows that. Everyone doesn't know that. And that's where you realize you really have some expertise.
Yeah. Oh, I agree entirely. So as you started out, how did you go looking for your first customers? Now that you had a message, you had a theme that you wanted to work on, how did you actually go out searching?
Yeah, that's another mystery, I guess, for a lot of people. Well, first of all, I would tell you that I think 90% of all the business we've had in the past 2.5 years has been word of mouth. It's someone who knows someone who knows someone who asks someone who needs a speaker. And somehow I get the gig. And so we didn't go out to look for customers. We started to focus on becoming relevant and known in the world. Because in my old job, I could sit down with someone and they'd say, well, what do you do? I'm saying, well, I work for Disney. Ever heard of them? Yeah. It's like, yes, I have. Okay. And then now I go to people, I say, hey, my name is Dan Cockerell. Ever heard of me? And they say, no, I haven't. So that's where you have to start to explain who you are. So I took a few tactics. One is the book. I think the book is a great calling card. Someone reminded me that the word author and authority have common roots. So when you are an author, you become an authority. You can be an authority before, but once you write a book, somehow you're even more of an authority on a topic. So I wanted to make sure I got that done. And How's the Culture in Your Kingdom, came out this past August 2020. And so that helps give me some exposure. I did an article of the week for the past 23 years at Disney. Every week I'd send out an article to my management team. And over time, I built that mailing list because I wanted to make sure I was giving people food for thought, how to get better. So when I left Disney, I kept doing the article of the week. So every Friday morning, everyone who subscribes to my free article gets an article that I've curated. I put a little recap at the top of it. And so I want to make sure people see my name every week because I want that person. Right now, we probably have 8,000 or 9,000 people subscribed. I want one of those people who's in a meeting and someone says, we need a speaker on a topic. And they go, well, I get this article of the week of this guy, Dan, because a lot of this is just luck and timing, getting these gigs. There's so many people in the world that can do the job. And there's so many people in the world who are looking for people to do the job. How do you be on the short list of be considered? And if people don't know your name, it doesn't matter how good you are. They're just not going to know about you. So being engaged on LinkedIn, there's all these things. I think high level and the podcast I do, we do every week. What I'll tell you is if you can go out and give people information that's going to help them, it comes back to you later. You have to do a whole bunch of work and create a whole bunch of value for free before people are going to hire you. And a lot of people, and we all get that on LinkedIn, we get the cold email that is just not even personalized. It's kind of like, I call it, that's how you play the lottery to do your business. I'm going to send out 10,000 of these messages and hope one person clicks and is interested. And I don't think that's a good way to do business. I think you need to start to talk to people, then know who you are, what you represent, engage them. And then if you do that, you're going to get business eventually. And as you get more business, now you have the word of mouth. The word of mouth is so powerful. When you've done work for somebody, they will now recommend you or not recommend you based on what you did. And it's about intent to recommend and intent to return. And so every time Val and I work for a client, we're like, this is like a piece of gold. We got to treat this person like gold because they are going to be the key to more clients. And it costs us nothing to get more clients through word of mouth. And it is much more powerful marketing because I trust people I know to recommend us. But getting started is absolutely the hardest part. Like everything in life, starting to get in shape, it's the hardest part. Starting a diet, it's the hardest part. Getting your first client is the hardest part. A lot of times you may just say, you know what, I'm going to do it for free because I want experience. I want to start practicing here and learn how to get this done. And people come out of the gate and want to charge all this money for things. I think it's a mistake. I think you need to be careful because you don't want to ruin your reputation before you even get started.
Yeah. Jody and I have a mutual friend, Mike Kim, and he always says marketing is about opening a relationship, not closing a sale.
That's perfect. That's a perfect quote.
And I've also been intrigued in my journey, it's those secondary connections that sometimes lead to the most interesting thing. It's not necessarily your first connections, but the people they know that sometimes create things.
Yeah. It's the idea that, there's a door. If you open that door, it might be locked and you can't get through, and that's frustrating. Or you might get through and there's going to be nothing there. But sometimes you open that door and there's 10 more doors. And those 10 more doors lead to 10 doors each. That's how it's exponential, I guess. And so that's why I've learned in this entrepreneur now, being open to everything. As I told you before we started recording, I don't turn down interviews. I want to talk to everybody and anybody. I get calls, someday, well, I'll be on your podcast, but how many listeners do you have? I'm like, well, if that's a concern for you, then let's just forget about it. I want to talk to people about what we do. And I always learn something from these interviews. And the more open-minded you can be, as we say, the more of a growth mindset you can have to look at the world in a positive way, be optimistic, be willing to go help people for nothing, be able to take chances. All these doors keep opening. Just it comes back to you tenfold.
So again, thank you, Dan. What are some of the interesting projects you're up to? Could you share with us the things that you're excited about right now?
Sure. Well, the pandemic, I think it hit everybody. Like us, we had a great first quarter, January, February, March. We're coming up on 2 years and we're like, wow, this is great. This is better than I thought it'd be. And then March came and Valerie and I looked at each other. We said, oh, this is what happens when there's a downturn. You're just got to figure it out. So what we did, instead of sitting around waiting for this to be over, we started to get to work. So I started 10 mastermind groups for free every day from 1 to 2 o'clock, Monday through Friday. I'd get on a call with anyone who wanted to call in. And we had people from South America and Europe and Canada and the United States and Australia. And we would just talk about how's everyone handling the pandemic and who's who. And I was introducing people that never would have met each other. And I didn't know where that was going to lead. I just knew I needed to be doing something. And sure enough, about a month and a half ago, we launched a subscription membership site, a community. And I'd gotten all the experience during the quarantine, knowing how to facilitate them, what people were interested in. So it was almost like I was doing research without knowing it. And now we've created that product called the Perch Community. And we do guest speakers and we have calls a couple times a month with everyone to check in and talk about various topics. My wife and my daughter created an undergrad college course during the quarantine. They took my book, became the textbook, and they created 13 weeks. She had just graduated from the University of Colorado. She didn't have a job. And we said, well, we're probably going to end up helping you, support you either way. So we might as well get some work out of you. And she had just gotten out of college. So she said, well, look, we need 13 weeks material, 2 classes a week. We need reading quizzes. We need a midterm, a final. We need case studies. And we built it. And we're now piloting that at Suffolk Community College. And we're going to look about expanding that and start to sell it to more universities. My book came out in August. We're working on another book right now with a couple of industrial engineers and my dad. The 5 of us are co-authoring it, called Hardwiring Magic, really taking the engineering approach to service and how do you really get sustainable results through that. I've been doing keynotes remotely. Valor and I do a workshop called The Method to the Magic. We've been doing remotely. It's an 8-hour workshop. We do the podcast. We've been working in Croatia and doing some work in Peru, which, has stopped, but hopefully that's going to pick up again. And we like to do some of that international consulting. So we kind of get involved wherever we can. We've created a course for real estate agents to talk about using the Disney methodology to become a better real estate agent and sell more houses. So you name it, we're doing it. Workshops, keynotes, books, whatever we can get in. Some of them have panned out. Some of them haven't. But once again, you don't get 100% success on everything. But we've been trying out a lot of different things.
Oh, thank you, Dan. And I'll have to admit, I'm intrigued. I'm an industrial engineer by education and training, and how you weave together your work in industrial engineering with that, I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
I'll tell you, I'll send you a draft copy of the book. You can read and give us some feedback. It's going to be like a 50-page book. So it's not going to be a full book, but it's really going to be these 2 gentlemen have helped us think about this. And I learned about industrial engineering at Disney, and they became the most important people I had in my meetings because they were just brilliant. You could ask them, I always had questions. All right, how many people can I put in front of the castle to see the fireworks that have the best view? And they'd come back to me 3 days later. We've put the viewing into A, B, and C quality of viewing. And we've used 3 different distances to look at how many people you can put in there. And they'd give me a number, and that number would be accurate. So they were industrial engineering. We tried to get our daughter to take that, but when she saw the engineering courses, she said, forget about it.
It's not for everybody.
No.
Well, Dan, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And we'll have included in the show notes, we'll have links to your website and your book and various things like that. So again, thank you for your insights here, and any final words from you.
Yeah, I would just tell you, if anyone out there is really thinking about, the next life change, it is refreshing. It is exhilarating to go do something different. And, Disney, I kept changing jobs because that was what kept me excited and kept me. And I got to a point where, okay, there's going to be the 20th job. It's just not going to be with Disney. So I would just encourage people to don't have regrets, really, and take calculated risks. Valor and I, we downsized. We got to a point in our career. We said, do we want to have 3 houses or do we want to just have experiences? And that was a big decision we had to make, because if we were going to go for more wealth, probably would have stayed with Disney. But we decided independence and experiences was our priority. So, we're living in a 2-bedroom condo now and just north of Denver, and our kids are all grown up. So there was no risk for them. They got through college and got their thing done. So I think there's a time and place to make these decisions. But if you feel like you're in a corporate job and you're cruising along and you just you're not fired up every day, you can get back to that feeling again. And there's ways to do that. And you can figure out how to do it at your company. But there's ways, if you've had that experience, you have a ton to offer. And with technology today, people learning to work remotely, people connecting remotely, the world is open to you now. And you just got to decide, are you willing to become a student again? That's the hardest part. And if you can decide to do that, there's a lot of fun to be had.
Great. Well, again, Dan, thank you much and have a great day yourself.
Thanks, Lynn.
Again, as before, my deepest thanks to Dan for sharing his insights and knowledge on becoming an entrepreneur. We talked about his journey in starting his business, how it was different between corporate life and now working independently. What was the mindset he knew he had to adopt as an entrepreneur? And we finally talked a little bit about how he does customer discovery. So we'll have Dan's contact information if you want to follow up with him. So remember, with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. And as your coach, I can help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. You now have the time, attention, and money to make this leap. So let me help you do it. If you're even having thoughts about starting an Encore career, please contact me, and you can take the self-assessment quiz at my website. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.